indicate to me that you would like to speak. I will then call on you, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. And I'll have to cut you off at that point. Don't want to be rude, but that is just in the board rules. And if this is one of your first times joining us, you will notice that I will go through and let all of the residents that wish to speak before any commissioners do any kind of follow-up. That's just the process here. If you're joining us via phone, you're going to hit that *9 button to raise your hand, and then you're going to do *6 to unmute yourself once you've been called on. So again, you're going to have 3 minutes. I'm going to be timing you, so I have to cut you off at the 3-minute mark. But let's go ahead. We're going to go through the first one we got. I'm going to call on you. I'm going to ask you to say your first and last name and where you are calling in from. And I will start with Danny.
Excuse me. Hi there. My name is Danny Hoover. I'm attending remotely from the city of Ypsi in Washtenaw County. And excuse me, I'm speaking as myself. I'm not representing Washtenaw County. I am the vice president of AFSCME Local 2733, a steward and a delegate to the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation. And I've been a supports coordinator with WCCMH since 2013. I am speaking specifically regarding agenda item D on the recruitment incentive pilot. It's a bad idea. It will adversely affect morale. And I'm wondering why this is even on the agenda when we voted no on the LU when presented in the first place. And additionally, there's no retention plan for existing members in these positions, as well as other high turnover positions. There's much more room for collaboration when it comes to retention and recruitment. Many people stay, excuse me, for a couple years in this entry-level position, get licensed and move on. And just the other day, I had a newly assigned person to my caseload tell me, "You're the third supports coordinator I've had in 6 months," and that is not a good feeling at all. Having a solid recruitment and retention plan for WCCMH is very important. And one more thing, when talking about this with another union buddy of mine, they said, nobody is coming to our gas station if we're charging $4 a gallon, they're gonna go over there. And so what that means is that over there is not WCCMH, and we want those folks to think of us too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're gonna move on to Corey.
Hi, my name is Corey Mason. I'm the president of AFSCME Local 2733, Washtenaw County Employees, calling from Plymouth Township. To follow up on Danny's remarks, I am here tonight to let you know that we did decline to sign the LOU that would have completed the collective bargaining component of the hiring bonuses. Unit A Chair Jeff Arbogast is going to talk more specifically about that because there's another topic that I wanted to talk about tonight. But the gist of it, from my perspective, is that we have significant equity concerns. We just feel like we're going to hear from members about why are these people who are hired now getting a bonus when I didn't when I was hired. And at this point, we're really not sure how to address those concerns with this particular program. We are open to hearing from CMH administration if they wish to engage in further negotiations, but I did want to inform you that at this point we have declined to sign that LOU. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is the MAG resolution. I understand that it's coming off the agenda, but I did want to speak in support of it. I am very grateful that the county has engaged in this long project to address our structural wage issues and competitiveness. And I'm very much looking forward to getting to actually negotiate the details to go from the strategic plan to actually dealing with the politics of which each bargaining unit is going to want. And I look forward to engaging in that process with the county so that we can try to address the very real concerns that MAG is trying to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jeffrey. Please state your first and last name and where you're joining us from.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Arbogast. I am the chair of 2733A. I will be speaking for myself. I am speaking from Northfield Township. Please excuse the background noise. I have the one-year-old tonight. I'm going to read the letter that I sent to Labor Relations and HR on the subject of the CMH agreement. Let me pull that up. I had it up and then I dropped it. So I apologize. Okay. I also forwarded this to Justin and Sue, as well as Jason. Good afternoon, Monica, Nina, and Judy. Thank you for presenting these letters for consideration. After talking over both of these with my leadership team, I would like to respond to one of them today. Pertaining to the CMH recruitment incentive pilot, I would like to inform you that we are going to decline on signing this because of the following concerns. Concern one, main concern. There is no retention plan for members in these positions, as well as others high turnover positions. With only incentives for new employees, Unity feels this plan will hurt more than it will help morale. We believe that there are more factors to getting and keeping members than a bonus structure for the first year. Many people stay a year or two to get experience and move on to higher paying positions elsewhere in the county. And because of this, we believe a retention plan active before implementing a recruitment plan is imperative to recruitment and retention for community mental health. Concern two, is an incentive like this going to work? The data is very questionable. That wasn't even admitted to us when we were presented it. So therefore, doing something about this, I think the money should go to more of a retention program as well as a recruitment program. Concern number three. There is also mention of a recruitment and retention committee that consists of county and CMH administration. We believe that only having leadership on the committee will lower the results than collaborating with labor. I'm not saying that I should be on the committee. I'm thinking that it should be somebody else that's somebody that's in one of those positions, or two people that are in those positions, to share recruitment ideas, to share concerns that they may have that would help that committee. I also had a question in there, but I think that question is going to be answered by administration. Thank you for your time and consideration on what I've said.
Thank you. I am not seeing any other hands. I will give it another moment. I'm going to go once, twice, three times. All right, I'm going to close public comment and move on to commissioner follow-up. Commissioners, any follow-up? All right, we've got Commissioner LaBarre.
Thanks, Chair. I know we have CMH admin with us here, and I'm hoping they can respond with a little detail in terms of the proposal. This is absolutely the first I've heard of these concerns, and I don't know why they wouldn't have been communicated far earlier. I think this board has a very good track record of trying always to be a good partner with labor, and I see no change in that. But we've got to understand exactly what the concerns are as they relate to the service recipients as well, and make this fit in a timeline that's already behind schedule just by virtue of the lack of individuals going into these professions to begin with. We're seeing similar shortages in childcare, in education. So I want to hear more about these concerns, but I'm hopeful that we can get some of that feedback and get something moving through this board as soon as possible, because the shortage is not going away. So I'm very open to hearing from labor. I wish we'd had a little more heads up on that, but hopefully the response from administration will address some of those things and we can forge some way forward here. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate hearing the concerns. I had similar concerns reading the resolution myself about what we do about making sure people that we have, that we retain those people. I don't think that a recruitment bonus in and of itself is a bad idea. I know very well the shortage of healthcare providers and how it's impacting people's daily life, so in their working lives. And so I think to try to get more people into the system to be working and think about ways that we can create recruitment bonuses is good. But I can also understand the feeling that people working right now in any position in healthcare feel when people come in with these recruitment bonuses, that we've been there all along and we've been doing the work, and some kind of retention bonus is a good way to think about maintaining some equity there. So while I am not opposed to recruitment bonuses, I would like to see a plan for a retention bonus as well for people on the front lines too. Thanks to these new labor voices that we've heard tonight. I know some of you come to comment sometimes. I really love hearing from you. Please come more often and always reach out with any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sanders, you're up.
Good evening. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be surprised, but I was surprised to hear the public comment. Caught off guard, maybe that's a better word. Caught off guard. So I just want to say that I understand why we may need recruitment bonuses, but I do have to say my labor background is going to force me to say then we should. I'd like to know what the cost would be if we were to offer retention bonuses for those employees that are currently working for us now. So if I can put in that request to see what that dollar amount would look like compared to what we're looking at for recruitment, I would like to ask for that.
All right. Oh, Administrator Dill.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, that's part of what we'll bring back to the board when we bring back an updated proposal or communication.
All right, Commissioner Morgan.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to thank Jeff and Danny and Corey for speaking with us. I think I just want to say I appreciate the manner in which the concern has been communicated. I think sometimes folks get upset and communicate in ways that are somewhat harsh, and none of you have done that. You've expressed your concern in a thoughtful and reasonable manner, and I look forward to admin and staff working to address those concerns, hopefully, and moving forward. But just want to thank you for that. Thanks, Chair.
Have any other commissioners? Not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to move on and thank everybody again for giving public comment. I know it's not always the easy thing to do, but it's always helpful for the work that we're trying to do here. So before I go on and ask for someone to move the agenda, I am going to let you know that we are going to be pulling items D and E. So we're going to be pulling that community mental health item because administration and labor are considering a counteroffer. So we'll hear more about that. And then we are pulling E in lieu of an update from administration when we get to report of the county administrator. So with that, we will move forward and I will look for someone to move the agenda. Commissioner Sanders, is that a hand to move the agenda? You want to take a shot at that?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm going to exercise my fresh woman year till its entirety.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll take my hand down.
Okay. It's dangerous. You got to put the hand down when you're done with it. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, Commissioner Scott.
I think I can do it. Just put a little if I put the ones that you're pulling in there. So the first thing that we're moving here is 4A, the Sheriff 2021-2022 Emergency Manager Performance Grant. Then 4B, Facilities Management Space Plan Project. 4 C, the trial court fiscal year 22 Michigan Drug Court Grant Program. For, that's it.
That's it.
Okay, that's it.
Is there a second support for that movement? Oh, Commissioner LeBar supports it. Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go forward now. Let's forge ahead onto 4A. Anybody from the Sheriff's Office want to talk to us about this grant? No? Okay. I assume everybody's done their homework. So then I can go ahead and ask Robert to call the roll on that one.
Commissioner Beeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Yes.
Commissioner LeBar,
Yes.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk.
Yes.
Item passed.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to 4B, Facilities Management Space Plan Project. I think we have somebody to talk to us about that one.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. And you thankfully heard from us at last working session. The item before you tonight looks very much like we discussed at that point. We're asking you to consider approving a project which would have us going through an RFP process to select a vendor that would do a space planning project for all county properties, and really looking to identify the types, amounts, and locations of spaces needed by the county to provide services to the public.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments about the space plan? Nope. Okay, feeling good about it. Feeling good. I would say, Andrew, last time I had made that comment about the facilities, the 2020 book. I do already have the 2020 book, so I don't need another one. Thank you. It was on the bookshelf. Just had to look around for it a little bit. All right, Robert, you want to call the roll?
Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Yeah.
Commissioner LeBar,
Yes.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Beeman.
Yes.
Item passed.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 4C Trial Court. Fiscal year 2020 Michigan Drug Court Grant Program. Anybody from the court want to talk to us? Nope. Robert's already ready. Robert's ready to go.
Commissioner
All right.
Jefferson,
Yes.
Commissioner LeBar,
Yes.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Beeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge.
Yes.
Item passed.
All right. Thank you. All right. We are just moving along here. We'll go on to report of the county administrator.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. We have 3 items for you this evening, beginning with the MAG, the compensation program. I am going to be joined this evening by Monica Boot, our Executive Director of Human Resources, and we are going to provide you with a verbal update on the program to this point. I think it important to note that there are 2 components of this that you all probably realize will have to be completed before we can implement anything. One, we need to negotiate with our labor partners with many of the components related to this. And of course, all of the policy considerations will come back to this body for approval. So with that, I'll turn it over to Monica, who will walk you through where we're at this point.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am going to attempt to share my screen here. Hopefully you'll see just an infographic that says MAG compensation study.
Yes.
Great, thank you for letting me know that. So first I wanted to thank the board for allowing us to provide an update and administration as well. And really the update, while it's coming from Human Resources, is really a culmination of the entire organization's work over the last couple of years. and work from every single employee that completed what we call a JAQ, a job assessment questionnaire, to supervisors that reviewed those, to our labor partners who provided some feedback, so our department heads and elected officials. The finance team was integral, as well as our labor director, our equity officer, and then the HR team as well. So this project has been a long time coming in terms of this particular stage. It's had a number of challenges, part of them pandemic related, as well as, you know, the rest of the organization having those challenges as well. I'm really pleased and thankful that Corey Mason had indicated that he's looking forward to the next stage of this process and really looking to negotiate how we can implement the recommendations made by our consultant. So I'm super optimistic at this point and excited to really move to the next phase, ultimately through that negotiation process to implement some of the great recommendations made by the consultant, and then into a maintenance phase of a new classification and compensation program. So here, just for the sake of tonight's conversation, we've prepared just this infographic that kind of just walks us through the timeline. And so really just to remind the commissioners and everybody listening that we really started this process in late 2018 and the beginning of 2019. So there was a strategic team formed, and we worked with an organization called Management Advisory Group. They had 20 plus years, particularly in the public sector, in terms of doing these kinds of studies. We really engaged at the first part of 2019. Some of you might recall, right as we tried to kick off the project, we had a big winter storm, which delayed it. So right from the beginning, we've had a number of different challenges that the organization has kind of worked through. But really the purpose of the study was to really review our classification and compensation systems, some of them that had been in place for 20 plus years, and really look at best practices, create recommendations for a program that would be fiscally responsible for a public sector organization, that would be fair and equitable across the organization, and really to attract, retain, and then value our employees. So at the beginning of 2019, we did partner with MAG. We had all of our employees participate, or we asked them to participate in an assessment of their positions. So each employee took anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes to complete an assessment questionnaire. Typically, employees know their jobs the best. We wanted to get information from those resident experts. Their supervisors reviewed their information. They were not able to change the information, but rather add additional context to what the employee provided as part of that piece of the process. From there, we also had MAG meet with our department heads and our elected officials to get more information about recruitment and retention challenges that they might be facing specific to certain positions. Earlier during the public comment, we've heard that there's some recruitment and retention challenges in CMH, but that's not central to CMH. We find that across the organization, particularly now following this first part of the pandemic. And as we move through that, a lot of people have heard from now about this great resignation and the number of employees across the country really that might be considering leaving their employers for a number of different reasons. And so recruitment and retention is something that really started to drive this project. It's something that I think that we as an organization really need to look at over the next few months and then into the next year or so. So as we moved through that process, in the second and third quarter of 2019, MAG reviewed all of that data that employees submitted, that departments had submitted. We also provided them all of our collective bargaining agreements, our current compensation plans, our current salary tables, all of the information that they really needed to be able to get the full picture of our organization. They performed some studies. We utilized approximately 60 benchmarked positions. The county has over 500 different classifications, and we took a subset of those that would be found in comparable organizations to be able to look at the salary structures of those positions to provide that market analysis. And so they took those 50 to 60 positions across approximately 25 different organizations that we found to be our competitors for recruiting and retaining employees from, and then developed their recommendations from there. So in the fourth quarter of 2019, MAG came on site, provided some preliminary information to our departments, provided them an opportunity to provide a final round of input in terms of those recommendations. MAG took those, and then in the beginning of 2020, provided us their, at that time, what we're calling their, final recommendations. So in March of 2020, basically MAG had indicated that as an organization, on average, our compensation structures lagged the market by about 7%. Then that's an average. So we had some classifications that lagged the market more, and we actually had some classifications that led the market. So that average was across the organization, indicating that we lagged about 7%. They also indicated, though, that our benefits typically exceeded the market, but that was based on some limited analysis that they were able to do. Again, I mentioned some of our classifications lagged the market by more than that 7%. And I think it's important to note here that there has been a perception that maybe that's just a pocket. Maybe our lower classified employees lag the market more so than our higher classified employees. And that's not necessarily what we found. We found that there were lagging classifications across the entire organization, both union classifications as well as non-union classifications, some of our entry-level classifications, as well as some of our executive director positions as well. So we saw that across the organization. And I think that that's important, that when we talk about the strategies going forward and we talk about implementation, that the strategic team really looked at an across the board implementation rather than some kind of targeted approach. So the other recommendations that MAG made at that time is that we implement a really consistent approach that's transparent to the organization and that's really easy to understand. And so they recommended that we move from 13 different pay plans down to 4 different pay plans. That instead of using a multitude of different compensation strategies that included steps, ranges, non-union adjustments, longevity, an assortment of different compensation strategies, that we consolidate those and use the same strategies across the organization to the extent possible. We had some employees on step tables, we had some on range tables. We had, like I said, some employees that are eligible for longevity and some that aren't. And so really trying to streamline those processes, understanding that everything needs to be negotiated. But if we could come up with a streamlined, consistent approach that's transparent and easy to understand, that would move us in the right direction. So following that report in March of 2020, the strategic team that had been pulled together, made up of corporation counsel, labor relations, equity, a few labor partners, as well as human resources and administration, really looked at those recommendations and felt like at that time there were limited resources that were set aside, and really wanted to make a recommendation to administration, well, ultimately to the Board of Commissioners through administration, to make sure that we looked at some creative funding strategies to make sure that we had funding that could create a sustainable and fiscally responsible program, and that we look at both structural and non-structural funding methodologies. They also recommended, the strategic team at that time recommended moving to range tables rather than step tables. That specific recommendation basically reduced the overall implementation cost by about 40%. So initially, from a salary only, not benefits included, we were looking at upwards of $5 million to implement the study. With the recommendation by the strategic team to consolidate that down to ranges rather than step tables, we were able to reduce that initial recommendation, like I said, by about 40%. So then in quarters 2, 3, and 4 of 2020, the pandemic occurred, and we were really faced with kind of a general pause, I'll say, to the project. We were really looking at the fiscal challenges resulting from the pandemic, trying to understand what resources were available. The board obviously was looking at the priorities and trying to continue with pandemic response. So there was a pause in terms of a lot of the the outfacing work of the MAG study. We continued within HR and finance to continue to work with MAG and make sure that they were providing any updates to the reports that we had received in March of 2020. And so really in the beginning of 2021, we really kind of regrouped from an organizational standpoint, and we created some subcommittees to really look at pre-implementation work. There were 5 subcommittees that were created. One dealt with benefits, really taking a deeper dive into understanding some comparables and really what it meant by indicating that we exceed the market in most of our benefit categories. So that committee really looked at a smaller subset of our comparables to be able to identify benefits from a healthcare perspective, retirement, paid time off, tuition reimbursement, all different kinds of the benefits, so that longevity included in that, so that we could get an understanding of how we compared to the market. Overall, that benefit team was able to pull together information that basically says that we meet or exceed benefits. Benefits are a little harder to compare across organizations because there's some subjectivity to it. Usually there's some benefits that might be transitioning out through attrition. For example, in our organization, we have both DC and DB participants, and the value of those is a little harder to quantify when you're comparing across organizations. So that team did a lot of work to prepare to go into negotiations. There was also a committee that looked at the financial components, really trying to identify where funding resources were, where we had constraints, where we had opportunities, trying to make sure that we looked at both structural and non-structural opportunities and unique funding strategies in terms of where we could find additional revenue as that came in, whether that be through equalization report or other kind of funding strategies. There was a policy and procedure committee that really looked at trying to make recommendations about all of our hiring and HR policies and procedures, hiring ranges, promotional ranges, temporary assignments, red circles, all of those kind of HR fundamental compensation policies. We also had a classification committee that really reviewed and made recommendations for how we would review classifications following implementation. We also engaged labor at that point to make sure that they had some final input in terms of where the classifications were recommended. And then we also made sure that we had an equity review. And so really the equity team really identified, while there were historical concerns, it really wasn't something where we were able to look at each classification, each person, without further compounding some of the inequities that we might have found, but rather really kind of taking a fresh perspective, making sure that whatever we implement is designed in a way that's going to be equitable, and that we can perpetuate that in the future to make sure that all of the things that we are trying to do, that we're taking the equity lens going forward. So I think what's important about these subcommittees is that they were made up of some labor folks, some HR folks, finance, administration, our equity office, and labor relations, just to make sure that we had a really well-rounded organizational approach, because those committees were really designed to create recommendations, knowing that anything that came out of those groups really had to be negotiated. And we wanted to make sure that there were enough voices, questions and concerns, and dialogue, particularly around some of the challenging concepts, to make sure that that helped prepare us to go into negotiations. Again, each of those teams came up with recommendations, or in the case of the benefits group, really had some data elements to be able to provide as we move into negotiations. Then in the second and third quarter of this year, we worked with MAG to get a final updated data subset. So the last data report was in March of 2020. So clearly we had new employees. We had some turnover through attrition. We also had some salary changes and some salary table modifications. So we wanted to make sure that we had the most up-to-date information now that we had some additional revenue that had been identified. And so in August of this year, we received a final report from MAG with all of those updated data elements. Also in July, We were able to utilize some of the funding that had been set aside, and knowing that the organization had been waiting for MAG, and through all of the pandemic response, excuse me, we provided a $1,300 lump sum bonus for all of our active regular employees, utilizing some of the dollars that had been set aside as a good faith effort to make sure that the organization knew that this was still important to us and we were attempting to move it forward. At this point in time, if the budget goes through with the current recommendation, we'll have approximately just under $3.4 million to work with in terms of implementing MAG's recommendation. And finance has been able to review that and vet that, and believes that we're in a good spot to be able to move to the next phase in terms of really looking to negotiate. So the balance of this year, we'll continue to look at some policy and procedure development, a lot of that surrounding the HR pieces, and going through the normal process to update the organization, get feedback from the organization, labor, and ultimately Board of Commissioner approval. Like I said, a lot of those are HR policies and procedures, but there will be some information about finance procedures, funding, and different ways that we can look at making sure that we have the resources available going forward. Then we look to be able to move into that next phase of negotiations beginning at the beginning of 2022. And again, I want to call out Corey Mason indicating that he's looking forward to that particular piece of the process and being able to move this forward. I think it'll be a great step for everybody to kind of pull together, look at the information, and figure out a way in which to be able to implement the recommendations made by MAG. And then from there, ideally the recommendations at this point in terms of the framework to move forward would be that it would be an across the board recommendation to implement rather than pockets. We would look ideally for a single implementation date so that there would be equity across the organization and move the organization forward all together. However, we understand that has to be negotiated and there could be different interests by different bargaining groups. Again, the framework would include consolidating those tables, trying to simplify and be transparent in the way that we have a compensation structure, and that we would continue to have discussions about total compensation, understanding that compensation might lag, but our benefits are at or exceed the market, and how do those two tie together to make sure that we're able to recruit, retain, and value our employees, but to do it in a fiscally responsible way. And then also to continue to address the delay. A lot of this data was collected in 2019, initially reported to us in 2020. We're now in 2021, looking at implementation in 2022 and continuing to understand that we had that initial 7% lag, knowing that it was going to take us some time to catch up. And now we've had a little bit of a lag beyond that. So really looking at really pushing for something to negotiate in that first quarter, hopefully implement in that second quarter, but then really continuing to have methodologies in place so that we can make sure that we're keeping it up to date and that it is a sound plan to be able to support the organization going forward. So that is the broad framework of where we started, where we are, and really our next steps in terms of really looking to partner with labor in the upcoming months to be able to implement MAG's recommendation. So I will pause there and I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Monica. I'm always a fan of a nice infographic, and I like this one. Do we have any questions from comments? Okay, Commissioner Morgan, there you go. I see you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for all of that, Monica. It sounds like, it doesn't sound like I know this has been a very, very long and difficult process to get through. And so I appreciate the hard work that you've been putting in for, I don't even know how long now, 3 years? Is that maybe more? This has been a huge undertaking, and I'm really happy that it's coming to a point where it's going to be moving forward and getting implemented. I think that is great. I do want to raise just a couple of thoughts for consideration. One being that I think we should absolutely work to get our employees to market rate, make sure that everybody is being paid fairly. I also think that our long-term goal should be to well, not reward, but to pay our employees above the market at some point. I think in my ideal world, we would be an employer as the county that provides competitive pay and exceptional benefits all together. And I think this data will allow us to work to get everybody to market, and then over the long term, look to see how we can be one of the best employers in the area, if not the best, of course. So I think so I wouldn't stop us at any point at saying, okay, we got to the market. We don't have to ever give more increases. I would like to see us strive to go higher at some point if we're able to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do have one concern, and I think I've expressed it before, but I just want to make sure it's reiterated again. And maybe Elise has a perspective or assessment on this, but how are we making sure that we don't perpetuate either gender or racial inequities in pay that are present in the market? Some job classifications market-wide underpay employees that are predominantly held by women or minority members of our community. How do we make sure as we're looking at those comparables that we're not perpetuating any of those inequities that exist, externally?
So I think that is one of the things that Elise's office and HR will continue to need to make sure that's on the forefront of anything that we do. And I think it's really important then when we look at the policies and procedures that each of the teams is going to recommend for negotiations, that we have consistency, we have guidelines in place to be able to review hires, making sure that if there's an exception to the rule, that there's some documented guidelines as to when do we make those decisions. I think it's also important that one of the recommendations that MAG had recommended is that there's an ongoing review of those market conditions, and then just being aware of them. I think making sure that we have a constant understanding of our demographics, and then when we're gathering information, whether we are gathering it as part of our process or whether we continue to engage with a consultant at certain points in time, that's important to us. And if we value that and we make sure that that's important to us, that we're understanding the data and not just collecting data and then not really understanding it before we implement it. I think that is crucial to the foundation of just making sure that it's known that it's important to us, that we're diving into it. We're just not taking data and then just arbitrarily implementing it, but that it's a conscious effort. And so Elise and I have had a few different conversations. She and Crystal were able to participate in a number of the subgroups because equity, while it was its own subcommittee, was also intertwined in every other concept. And so making sure that it's just an ongoing conversation, I think is the first and critical piece of it, but it's something we just have to be aware of. I don't know if Elise wants to make another comment about that.
No, I think that encompasses the position of the equity office well on this. It's an ongoing issue that we're aware of and are interested in solutions as they present themselves, but I don't think we have a silver bullet at this time. It's an ongoing process.
Great, thank you. That is just one concern that I'm always worried about. I think we're going to implement something big and wonderful for our employees to make sure that we're raising everyone's wages to at least market rate. And I just want to make sure that we don't inadvertently do anything that we don't want to do. One other question I do have for you, which is, should we be, or has there been any consideration to looking at some of our classifications of employees to say these classifications of employees are underpaid within the entire market as a whole? Therefore, maybe we should look at paying them above market rate, thinking specifically about the concern around retaining mental health workers. I think all mental health workers tend to be underpaid. So should we be looking at saying, okay, we're aware of that systemic issue, that market-wide issue. Should we be trying to set a rate of pay or a target that is above the market for some of these classifications that are lower paid or traditionally underpaid across the market? And I don't know if there's a a truly good way to think about that it doesn't make somebody else mad or upset. But candidly, that's, I feel like there are some classifications, some of work that truly are underpaid. And I'd like to find ways to make sure that we're doing better than the rest of the market, if possible.
So I think that that's a really interesting point, and the fact that you even acknowledge some of the challenges with trying to have that conversation, I think raise just that overall, how do you create a classification system and then layer on compensation? So the classification is that relative placement of other positions compared to other positions in the organization in terms of the complexity of that job. And so I think that's the first part of it. I think there have been conversations. And what I would say is, as we move into negotiations and we go through the first phase of implementation, we can't stop there, that there will be continuing philosophies. And if you said this particular group is further behind the market, I think right now the recommendation from the strategic team and the framework to go forward isn't this across the board implementation, because we do know on average everybody's behind. So let's start there, and then we can develop strategies in the second or third phase of implementation to be able to address unique circumstances, whether that be recruitment and retention, whether that be just classifications that we may put more value on than other markets might. So I think the first phase is being able to move forward and at least get something implemented that is fair and equitable across the organization, have really good, solid guidelines, policies, and procedures to make sure that we're addressing equity. And then we identify those pockets, those different unique classifications, and then figure out what strategies we can implement in a second or a third phase, and then an ongoing maintenance of the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
All right. Next up, we've got Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me. I think I have at least 5 questions written down right now. Sorry. Monica, I know you can do it. Also, Commissioner Morgan, I think you asked some really pertinent questions about making sure that people whose jobs have been traditionally undervalued as women or as minorities, that we're looking at those things. I applaud that point. Wasn't even a point I thought about. I was like, that's super. And I love the idea that you want to think about making government employees paid above the average. That's really revolutionary. Since when did government employees get paid above the average? You do it for a love of service, right? Okay, maybe not. And to your point about what our county employees are making, you noted about CMH employees. I just like to pull in the idea of the public health nurses as well. Currently, what public health nurses are making currently right now, I made $12,000 more than that in 2013. So I just like there is a significant lag of what people who are doing in public health and public health nursing between what they get and what people who are working at bedside and hospital get. And I think that's a shame. I'd like to see us change that. Okay, here's my first question. The MAG survey, everyone was included, because my understanding was, to the point about public health nurses, that they were not included in the process.
Yes, so every employee, when MAG came on site, we had information sessions that every employee was able to participate in so that they could understand the process, hear from MAG, have an overview of what was called the job assessment questionnaire, which was a JAQ. And then every employee was given an opportunity to complete that job assessment questionnaire. For classifications where there were multiple employees, we wanted to make sure that we provided enough flexibility. So if there were 10 people in a classification, 10 individuals could have submitted a PDQ, or PDQ, that's our old terminology, sorry, a JAQ, or they could have collectively, 2 or 3 of them worked together on it, all 10 of them could have worked together on it. So we really wanted to make sure that if an employee felt better supported in a group, that was an opportunity for them to participate. But yes, every employee was given an opportunity to complete the JAQ, and then their supervisor was allowed to review it, not change it in any way, but to add additional information. And then the other component is during this last round of the subcommittee work, there was a classification group. And that classification group reached out and made sure that we worked with our labor partners to make sure that they had an opportunity to review those preliminary recommendations from MAG, provide any additional input so that there was another review. So there's been multiple opportunities for different feedback, whether that be the employee, the supervisor, department head, labor. But yes, every employee had an opportunity to complete the process. If a position was vacant, we also went back and made sure that if positions were vacant, that somebody reviewed that particular classification.
So the nurses in public health are included in this. There's a section in the MAG study to look at that.
Yes.
Okay. Second question. You said that there were 50 to 60 positions benchmarked and 25 comparable organizations. Can we get a list of what are the positions that were benchmarked and what are the comparable organizations?
Absolutely. Yes, I will get those to you.
Okay. See, easy, Monica. I knew you had it. What is the difference then between the PDQ process that we had and MAG? I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the openness of MAG compared to the previous PDQ process and the transparency involved in MAG as opposed to PDQ.
Okay.
More transparency, right? And everything I read about compensation and wages and et cetera, the more compensation transparency you have, the better. And it seems like there's some rumblings about MAG not being quite as transparent as the PDQ process.
Okay. So the PDQ process is a position description questionnaire. It's the same kind of fundamental analysis of a classification, which really points to a point factor system where there's typically some criteria associated with the position, and you might have a number of factors, education, experience, independent judgment, consequence of errors. And for each of those categories, there's a point value. And then the total point value creates where the position would fall relative to other positions. So MAG uses the same fundamental analysis. However, they use 14 different factors instead of right now we have 3 different tools. Some of them have 6, 7 factors. Some of them have 9, 10 factors. And so they're very different. So one of the I think great recommendations from MAG is that we would use the same tool across the organization, which would lend itself to better understanding of the tool, more transparency there, so that it's also consistent. I think what we've been able to do, and I would, constantly look to Corey and his team to make sure that HR, when we're looking at classifying positions and going through the PDQ process, because that's the group that we generally see most PDQs from. We see them from other groups as well. But I would say over the last 2 cycles of the PDQ process, Corey and his team met with HR, and we developed a process that continues to evolve and continues to get more and more feedback from the employee. This last round, we really tried to make sure that the employee had a verbal opportunity, more of an interview process, so that we could sit down and really talk to them and listen to them, knowing that some employees write their descriptions really well, but some people are more verbal. And so making sure that we gave the employees a greater opportunity to provide some feedback. With the MAG tool, I think that in my opinion, we're moving toward more transparency. One of the subcommittees that worked at the beginning of this year was made up of a few HR, finance, and a few labor folks. And really that group made a recommendation for that when we move forward for any new classification, as well as what we would used to call the PDQ process. We'll probably come up with a new term, a JAQ process, but to make sure that as we go through that process, that there's a clear understanding of the point value that comes out of that, and then the other factors that go into classifying a position. So when you look at classifying, you start with the point factor system. That's the foundation. And we can be really transparent in terms of the values of the 14 factors and the rubric that's used. We want to make sure employees understand the rubric. We want to make sure that we're getting valuable information from them, but then that there's an assessment. So we start with that rubric, the point value system, and then the second piece of it is market conditions. Is it difficult to recruit for a position? Is it hard to retain? What are the market comparables like? Is it a position that maybe we want to put more value on than the market? So how do we factor that into our conversation? And then the last piece is organizational alignment. Those last two pieces are a little bit more subjective. They're not points, right? And so it's factoring a position and classifying it is really more of an art than a science. We have some metrics behind it that provide us the foundation, the guideline, and then the other pieces are kind of where it might be tweaked up or down. But that classification subcommittee really came up with a recommendation as to who should our comparables be, what should those positions be that we use on a regular basis. We would make a recommendation that labor would have input, like if we wanted to change that list, that there should be mutual agreement between LMT and administration to be able to change that, and that we would have this process to notify departments and labor and the employees that when HR classifies a position, here's the information we use. Here's the point value, and then here's a narrative that explains how we got to our assessment of that position. So I agree with you. I think moving forward, we want to be as transparent as possible. We want to partner with both the employee and make sure we understand their job, the departments, and then in terms of understanding the oversight, and then making sure that we also work with labor to get that full picture. The more information we have, the better we're able to actually classify the position and make a recommendation.
That's great. See, Monica, I knew you'd have all the answers. That was a really good answer, very thorough, and explained a lot to me. So it doesn't seem like it's the same amount of transparency with maybe some more steps included in that JAQ process as opposed to the PDQ process. Funding opportunities. You talked about funding opportunities, which we might do some of these changes with. In what I would have been, we pulled that resolution, but maybe what I would have been looking for a part of that resolution is what are the funding opportunities that we have come up with to think about funding the MAG recommendations.
So I might
It might be a very long answer. And if you just are like, it's really long and I need to like send an email to you, I can understand that if there's a short version.
Sure, we can. I can partner with Tina and make sure that we provide something in writing following the short, or try to be a short. I'm not always the shortest in terms of responding, but the short answer is making sure that right now that there's policies that indicate a certain amount of, Tina will correct me if I'm wrong, excess beyond what's budgeted. So if we have excess revenue that's beyond what's budgeted, a certain percentage of that would be allocated to compensation. And so those are policies and procedures that we'll still be bringing to the board, probably in the first quarter of next year. And as we go into negotiations to make sure that we solidify how do we fund those, the general fund, non-general fund components. When there are non-structural ways to be able to provide compensation and structural ways. So just making sure that we really flesh out a holistic approach. Non-structural and structural, general fund, non-general fund. How do we set aside dollars in anticipation so that when they come in, we already know that a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount is going to be allocated toward compensation, knowing that the board also has, a vast number of other priorities, and those change based on the circumstances, the pandemic, for example. So we'll provide some additional information, but hopefully that's a short answer.
It's a good short answer because I know I have 10,000 questions. So that's a good short answer. And I guess as we see information about MAG come forward again, I'd be interested in knowing more of the particulars about that, because that was one of the holdups that we had with MAG initially, was thinking about funding opportunities. So if we've come up with some ideas about that, that's helpful to hear more about that. The final kind of question / comment was that I talked about that transparency, and then we talk about kind of a reactive versus proactive approach to pay communication, right? And one of the things that comes into play there is making sure that we're keeping up on employee engagement. We did pass that resolution last year to start an employee engagement process every year. So I'll hope that we can get a follow-up on where we are with doing RFPs on finding a company to do that employee engagement, and how that will very much impact what we're talking about with compensation as well, because there are a lot of other things about compensation or your work that are satisfiers other than compensation, but compensation is definitely one of them. So I guess that wasn't really a question. It was more of a comment. Colleagues, thank you very much for letting me ask all these questions. Monica, thanks so much for your thorough questions. This is obviously people and working families are something I'm passionate about, and making sure people are taken care of. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. That was a lot of questions, but they were good questions. And thank you, Monica, for hanging in there with us. Commissioner Sanders.
Okay, I'm not gonna allow that comment to, I've got 4 more questions, so this might be a question night. Okay, so I'm gonna run these off. If you can answer them, fine. If you need to send me or share with us at a later date, that's fine as well. Can you tell me when were the contracts last negotiated for our bargain for employees? So if this process started in 2018, this is a multi-question. If it started in 2018, were we dormant during COVID in terms of this process? Were we still working on it? And when was the last time contracts were negotiated? And then I still have 3 more questions.
Okay. Most of our contracts will expire in 2023. We did have a few, we're currently in negotiations with 3052. We're coming out of a 2 or 3 year contract with them. I think 17 was when we signed the last contract with them, or 18. The years are all run. Now with COVID, I lost that year, right? So my years are a little off. We worked with POAM and COAM last year. We have a reopener with them. Those are the units that, so 3052 we're working on this year. POAM and COAM I think come back up next year, but the majority of our contracts come up in 2023. So during the pandemic, that later part of 2020, it was a little pause. There was still work being done on the background, but I will say that all of those contracts, there have been ongoing consistent salary progression during the last few years while we've been working on the study.
Okay. Are you aware of any subcommittees that were not meeting as they should have been meeting? Were there any pause? Were there any dormant?
Yes. So the subcommittee work was really identified to really be the first quarter of this year. And so toward the end of that, there was a bit of a lag in terms of the committee kind of doing the work that they were intended to do to come up with recommendations. But because we didn't really have identified funding, we were really looking to see what the priorities were for the organization. So they did tail off there a bit, but the majority of their work was really done at the end of that first quarter. The benefit committee had completed all of their work. The classification committee had come up with the recommendations about how do we recommend a transparent process to Commissioner Scott's questions about how do we do these processes in the future and how can we be transparent. So they made a recommendation there. They made some recommendations about what comparable organizations, what benchmark positions that we would use in the future. And then they also had turned over a lot of the final classification work to HR, and we finished that work with labor and departments and submitted final position alignments within the last month. The equity team, that one again had some general recommendations, and that really became more of a philosophical conversation. It was more about conversation with that particular group. The finance and funding committee, again, they were really more of a conversational group rather than specific recommendations. Now that group's work will feed into the policies and procedures that finance will bring forward in combination with admin over the next couple months. And then the policy and procedure group was the 5th group. And so they had come up with some basic guidelines and recommendations, and that work will finalize now that we have this framework to be able to move forward. We'll kind of regroup with that subcommittee's work and really start to engage the organization. So I do think that, it started to tail off there at the end of the first quarter, because we really didn't know what the next steps were going to be while we were waiting for funding and priority kind of conversations. So some of that will kind of now start to really gear back up as we come into this next phase as we move into negotiations.
Okay, and the last two questions are related to transparency and should be quick.
Okay.
Somebody reviewed the vacant positions. Was that someone a staff person or a supervisor of that vacant position? That's one, so hold that. And then, are you aware of any unanswered requests for information related to the bargaining units in terms of this process? And then I'm done. So
Okay.
thank you, Monica.
Okay, so in terms of vacancies, it depended. Some of those were new classifications that might have been created due to a reorganization. And so the information there, if the position continued to be vacant and there were no other similar positions, we really had to focus in on the job description as it's written and be able to provide that information to MAG. In those cases, we had to rely on supervisors and department heads or elected officials to be able to give us an assessment of where that work was. So oftentimes if it was vacant, we really weren't able to lean necessarily on an employee per se. One of the things that I'll say about that is that the subcommittee on classification work made a recommendation that hopefully will go through with negotiations, is that anytime there is a vacant position or a new position, that there's an automatic review of that position 12 to 18 months later. Because when you create a new position, you have some expectations about what that position is going to be responsible for. But we all know that as it evolves, some of those things may or may not come to fruition. So we want to make sure that there's a review. So any of the recommendations for the vacancies for this first round of implementation would be likely, depending on negotiations, move forward based on the limited information we have, but based on, again, Commissioner Scott's questions about this, our prior PDQ process, will have an ongoing ability for positions to be reviewed over time to make sure that if there were vacancies and the new information becomes available, that we take that information into account. In terms of unanswered questions, I've been out of the office the last week and a half, but I do understand that this week there's been some new questions submitted. And I will work with Judy Kramer, our labor director, to make sure that we respond to anything.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Commissioner Machieski, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I only have two questions. Monica, thank you very much for the presentation and the work of your team and those in administration who've been working on this for a number of years. Appreciate it. I have a question specifically about CMH. Has the direct care wage premium pay that has been paid out by the state of Michigan for those working on Medicaid programs been factored into this at all?
I'm not able to directly answer that. I would have to go back and look and talk with MAG to see what degree that might have been part of their initial review. So when MAG initially reviewed the information, they took that JAQ, they took our current compensation systems. They would have met with the CMH director and her team to be able to understand any of the challenges. So I would need to kind of follow up and see what conversations occurred to make sure that MAG considered that as part of their assessment.
Okay. And that is at this point, a temporary situation only approved for the current fiscal year from the state. So, but was curious as to whether it had been involved or not. The second question, again, deals with CMH. And, with my day job, I currently have 4 postings for social workers and a posting for a nurse at my agency. And we cannot get applications. Nobody will apply. And, we work in a capitative system like CMH does. I mean, you get Medicaid revenue to operate that program. Does MAG fit into that kind of fiscal structure where we can use that existing revenue stream to implement the recommendations of MAG, or would this require non-CMH funds to have to be put into CMH to implement it?
So I might need Tina to support a little bit on this question in terms of, and potentially Nicole Phelps, in terms of the funding strategies. I think a lot of that is going to, what's interesting, and you know, it was pulled from tonight's agenda, but the recruitment and retention kind of strategies is trying to figure out, you know, there's this holistic concern regarding recruitment and retention across the organization. We were attempting to try to find a solution for CMH as potentially a pilot, as one piece of a broader puzzle. So again, Corey, Jeff, and Danny all mentioned that, you know, this particular strategy that we recommended was regarding recruitment, but there are also other components about how do we address the retention piece. So one of the challenges, particularly with CMH, and I've had conversations with Trish and her team, is just kind of understanding that dynamic of their funding stream is different than the general fund. But then we also have the overall, you know, guidelines of trying to look at the organization as a whole. We have 17 different bargaining units, different interests. And so again, looking at departments in a similar way to say, this is our overall strategy. These are the guidelines we want to use, but then understanding that some departments might have an identified need or a different funding strategy that we might need to look at and figure out how to tweak. We've talked about over times, maybe carving out CMH in terms of their need from a labor perspective to understand we need to be a little bit more nimble there. But again, we still have that overarching, we are one organization, and really trying to make sure that we have equity across the organization, but still address individual departmental needs. So I'm probably going to have to follow up with you, Commissioner Maciejewski, on that particular question to get some more feedback from Tina and Nicole and potentially Trish and Administrator Dill to be able to kind of follow up on that concern.
Okay, yeah, I would appreciate what you might be able to find out about that, and if we are going to have to look at non-CMH funds or not. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, before I go to round two, Commissioner Scott, I see you. Do we have any other commissioners that haven't spoken yet before I start going to round two? No. Commissioner Scott, go for it, round two.
Thank you. I just thought of this as Commissioner Maciejewski was talking to, and Commissioner Sanders' point about, like, you know, so we have 17 different bargaining units. Most of those bargaining units come up in 2023. And so, you know, there's this idea of trying to get everything sort of together. What about people who bargained in the recent past? Will they have to reopen their contracts to talk about this?
So we have a reopener already scheduled, I believe, for POAM and COAM next year.
Okay.
And so, and then we're currently in negotiations with 3052. So depending on how that goes yet this year, I think you know, the compensation piece, there could be some things that are addressed during this round of negotiations, and then MAG holistically in terms of moving to consolidated tables, for example. I think one of the benefits of the recommendation for MAG is that by moving to consolidated tables, but still using ranges, it still allows each individual unit to have interests, but still allow the organization and administration and finance to be able to look at the system holistically. So I think it's one of the advantages of MAG's recommendations.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're in the round two now. Any other commissioner comments? We
better move on before I come up with more questions.
That is true. I don't want to get into round three and then four and it's just you. But if you have other questions, I mean, now's the time. No. Okay. Thank you, Monica. That's it's really helpful. We knew that MAG was going to be a very popular topic of conversation, and I think this was handled really nicely. And to Commissioner Maciejewski's point, I think look, I got a whole cohort of social work students that are going to graduate next month. Maybe get you and Trish. I don't know if Jimena's looking to hire some social workers, do a nice panel as a nice way to recruit that. So let me know if you're interested in doing that, because all about getting social workers jobs and filling these county positions and yours, Commissioner. Okay, moving it along now to, Greg, I think there's another thing.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say thank you to the commissioners for the very thoughtful questions this evening. Obviously, we owe you some additional responses to some of those questions, but I'm certainly impressed by how much thought went into not only the questions, but also your patience around this process. I think Commissioner Morgan mentioned we've been at this for almost 3 years. It's been slow, but again, you guys have provided the motivation for us to move this forward. There's more to come. As I said in my opening remarks, there are components of this that will have to be negotiated. There are policy considerations that you all will have to approve. But I think what we laid out today is a framework that can provide some success for the organization. Then lastly, I want to thank the MAG strategic implementation team for their hard work. They continue to work through all of this. It's been great to see us all coming together to work on this item, and also the work of Monica and the HR team. They've been steeped in this work for, again, 3 years. So we will be back before you. There's still much work to do. This is a priority not only for the board, but for me, and we'll make certain that we continue to try to move this forward in the very best possible way, and make sure that communication is a strong part of what we produce. So moving on to my next item, I'll be joined by our Public Health Officer, Jimena Loveluck, for the conversation around our vaccine recommendation. And again, like MAG, we spent a lot of time over the last 60 days talking about this item. I just want to say on the front end, thank you to our health officer, our medical director, and Diane. The four of us have been working on this tirelessly for, again, the last few months. And I think you have in your inbox a communication that Jimena will walk you through this evening. Jimena?
Thank you, Administrator Dill, and good evening, Commissioners. As Administrator Dill mentioned, this has been ongoing work that has been done very closely between the Health Department leadership and county leadership, really taking in stock all of the public health tools that we have available now to protect not only our residents, but also our employees from COVID-19. Our approach has always been a layered prevention strategy. So ensuring that we're not only doing those things that we were recommending from the very beginning in terms of, good hand hygiene, social distancing, wearing face masks, following isolation and quarantine guidance. But now, obviously, with the availability of safe and effective vaccines, that is our best public health tool to prevent further spread of COVID-19 and really, most importantly, protect people from serious illness and death. And we also now have time where the CDC and other researchers have been able to investigate the impact that COVID-19 vaccines have had. And so even with the surge that we've seen with the Delta variant, which is the most highly contagious variant we've experienced thus far, we've seen that vaccines continue to be effective in preventing serious illness and death. Most importantly, CDC has done some recent studies that confirm that people who are unvaccinated are more likely to contract COVID-19 and test positive than those who are unvaccinated. They have higher rates or higher risk of serious illness and death. And even for people who have had COVID-19 in the past and are not vaccinated, there is still additional protection that can be gained by being vaccinated. And that's been confirmed also by recent CDC studies. And of course, no vaccine is 100% effective. We've seen breakthrough cases, and in Washtenaw County, certainly, we've also seen kind of an increase in the breakthrough cases. That's partly related to the fact that we have such a highly vaccinated population. But also, we still see that even in breakthrough cases, the vaccine provides protection against serious illness and death. And so as we think about protecting the health and well-being of our employees, thinking about our employees interacting with residents, and also recognizing that exposure can happen in all places, not just in the workplace, it can happen outside of the workplace. What can we do to ensure that we are doing everything possible to protect our employees and the residents we serve? And so with the health department in collaboration with county administration, we've worked diligently to offer vaccination to county employees. That includes early on in the year when we were dealing with sort of challenging prioritization of certain populations and workers, to now when vaccine is readily available and you can get it through the health department, your local pharmacy, and many other vaccine providers. So vaccine certainly has been widely available now for many months. And we've continued to do all that we can to promote vaccination and ensure that we're providing that in an accessible and equitable manner. At the same time, we know that we continue to have exposure to COVID-19, and we have both cases among people who are not vaccinated as well as breakthrough cases. The advantage, of course, is for people who are vaccinated. The CDC guidelines around quarantine are different. And that means that could lead to less disruption of our work and of our services, and allow people to really continue to do their work without necessarily having to quarantine and stay away and spend time at home and use sick time. So for example, with people who are fully vaccinated, if they are a close contact, they don't necessarily need to quarantine as long as they don't have symptoms. The guidance does include a recommendation for testing 5 to 7 days after exposure, wearing a face mask when indoors for full 14 days. But if people who are fully vaccinated do not have symptoms, they do not need to quarantine. And that's a big difference for someone who is unvaccinated, for example, where they would have to quarantine. So there are obviously advantages not only to protecting the health and well-being of employees with vaccination, but also really ensuring the continuity of county operations. And so what we have explored in conjunction with our medical director, Dr. Juan Marquez, and Administrator Dill, is a policy that would require weekly testing for employees that are not vaccinated as we continue to promote vaccination. And that, of course, as I mentioned, is widely available. The key, of course, is ensuring that as we look at next steps, we're ensuring that testing is accessible, that it's free of charge, that we have appropriate measures to document and record that information in a way that complies with HIPAA and other rules around personal health information. And that, of course, as the health department, we're committed to ensuring that we continue to offer vaccination for employees, that we also follow up on any positive test results so that we can provide appropriate isolation and quarantine guidance. And also that we continue to use our best science and evidence to promote good public health guidelines across the county. So I know that Administrator Dill mentioned that you have some information that's been shared with you around some draft direction and policy related to this. And we obviously will continue to work with county administration to ensure that we're following the best public health guidelines around these recommendations and policies. In addition, a lot of this has come from work that that's been shared with us from Ingham County. I work very closely with the health officer in Ingham County. Ingham County has adopted a similar policy that we've looked at. We've been able to get more information from them. This policy was just launched in Ingham County. It just went into effect on November 1st. And so much of what we've gathered has been in collaboration with Ingham County as well. So Administrator Dill, I'm happy to answer other questions, or if there's anything I've left out. I think that covers most of what we wanted to include.
So thank you for that, Jimena. I wanted to afford the board an opportunity to ask any questions that you all might have. And it's my hope that you all will be supportive and that we can continue to move this forward.
All right. Well, before I open it up for questions, I want to take a moment to congratulate Jimena. Hopefully everybody saw the news, but she was selected as United Way, Washtenaw County's Woman of the Year. So congratulations, Jimena. Wish we could congratulate you in person, but this is as close as we get right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Commissioner Hodge. I share it with the staff at the Health Department.
All right, now I'll open up for questions. We got any questions, anybody? Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I am so sorry I'm talking so much tonight, but I have lots of thoughts and feelings apparently. Certainly congratulations to Jimena. I think it is a well-deserved honor, and I'm sure you are very tired at this point in the pandemic that seems to never be ending. I do have one question, which is, and maybe it's a question that would be better followed up with offline, but I am curious as to why we aren't following the University of Michigan's policy that requires all employees to be vaccinated just flatly. It doesn't offer an option for testing out of it. It simply says that you must be vaccinated. So I'm curious, what is the rationale for not doing that?
So I'll just step in and say that we're attempting to follow the science. This is the first phase of a recommendation. We'll continue to monitor things and continue to update our recommendation as we move forward. I guess I'll push it over to our health officer to add to that, but to let you all know that this is where we think is the best place for our organization at this time, and we'll continue to monitor things.
Thank you, Administrator Dill. I would just add that part of what we're also wanting to ensure is that we do reach a certain goal of vaccination level among our employees. And so similar to what we've seen with the University of Michigan requirement, they certainly have been measuring the vaccination rate among their students, their employees. And that's something similar that would be part of this process and policy, so that we can ensure that we do reach a goal. Right now in the draft, 90% would be the goal for employees to be vaccinated. And so we continue to really promote that vaccination is the best public health tool, the best prevention tool, and we would continue to monitor the level of vaccination among employees.
All right. Commissioner Scott.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. And congratulations, Jimena. I'm so happy for you. It's good to have good things happen in the middle of all of this craziness. My question is about, just so I don't want to mince words. I 100% support a vaccine mandate for county employees, and I wish we had it. How was not having a vaccine mandate going to impact any funding we get with the CMS requirements that people receiving funds from Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services be required? Those places have requirements for their staff to be vaccinated.
I think, and I mentioned this to Administrator Dill as well, we certainly are awaiting those OSHA rules. We have yet to see those, although I think the federal government has said they're coming in the next week. And we have to see sort of what those rules entail. It could affect some of our departments differently as well, depending on the services we provide and the funding that we receive. So I think we will be certainly following the development of those OSHA rules and seeing how the federal mandates might impact the county, because there may need to be adjustments to meet those requirements.
Yeah, thanks. I'm concerned about that. And I don't want there to, they have been clear that this is a requirement that they're going to have. We don't know how OSHA is going to come down and what the exact thing is, but I would be very concerned that we would have any type of lag in funding for the areas where we need that money the most, because they've been CMS has been clear about the fact that you need to have, those people working in these areas need to have vaccines. So I don't want them to say, your funding's cut off because you don't have a vaccine mandate right now and you knew it was coming and it's your fault that you didn't do it. So that's one concern that I have, like kind of a practical concern. And the other concern I have is just to make sure that people know that when they are coming to get services at Washtenaw County, that they can be sure the people that they are interacting with have a vaccine. You know, from before pandemic, you all heard me talk about how much I love a vaccine. And I'm one of the last, I think, smallpox vaccinated people in this country. So they weren't doing smallpox vaccines, but my dad got me one. I don't know how. So, you know, so I would love to maybe rethink this position and just be clear that I 100% support a vaccine mandate for our county. Thanks.
All right. Commissioner Morgan, I gotta wait till round 2 to get you again. Does anybody else want to have a comment before we start round 2 of comments? All right, Commissioner Morgan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I need to be maybe more blunt as well, following Commissioner Scott. I absolutely think we should have a flat out vaccine requirement policy similar to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. If Washtenaw County, that oversees public health, isn't going to require the vaccine of our employees with the mindset of making sure that every person who interacts with our county staff feels safe and are safer because of folks being vaccinated. This seems like the most direct way to increase vaccination rates, which we absolutely need to do throughout our community and our state and nationally. I guess I feel like we're not doing as good of a job as the city of Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan if we are not having a flat out requirement that employees get the vaccine. So I would hope that I appreciate where we've come. I think this is some good progress, but I share Commissioner Scott's thoughts that I think we should have a vaccine requirement for our employees to make sure that the public feels safe interacting with our employees. Thank you, Chair.
So perhaps this could be a discussion point for board leadership next week.
Of course, and we will certainly take the comments this evening under advisement. This is a fluid situation as described by both the health officer and myself. We'll continue to modify our response accordingly. So we will add this to the agenda for our next week's leadership meeting and continue to build this out over the coming weeks and months.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Just one other thing before Jimena leaves. We talked about it this morning at the department head meeting, and Chair, you stole my thunder. I just wanted to say publicly again, just a heartfelt thank you to Jimena for her work. She is considered a thought leader in the state. I think our community, our organization is so much better for her work and the work of her team. And I just wanted to say publicly how grateful I am to have her as a colleague.
Absolutely. And we can certainly share the thunder on that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, commissioners, that takes me to my final item, and I'll be quick about this given the time. I wanted to provide you guys with a quick update on Safe House. You should have in your inbox an operations update. We continue to work at a fever pace to make certain that the survivors that we have become responsible and accountable for have what they need to transition to more stable housing and have the wraparound services that are required. We have worked night and day to make sure that there is a strong conduit for communication, that we're working with external service providers and Safe House to make sure that survivors have what they need. In addition to that, I received this morning my first briefing on the external investigation. That briefing will be followed by a more full conversation with the board of Safe House tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. I will certainly report out to you guys sometime after that meeting, and we'll continue to try to work to make sure that services for survivors in Washtenaw County happen at the highest level. In terms of the facility itself, we continue to work through the list of items that we have on our to-do list. We're making good progress there. I will provide you as a component of the investigation update, an update on that work as well. So I'll stop there. I don't know if you have any specific questions for me. There are a couple of other things on the to-do list that we can talk about beginning with leadership next week. But again, the overall goal is to make sure that survivors of domestic violence have what they need in Washtenaw County.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, comments, commissioners?
So seeing none, that will conclude my report, and thank you all for your patience this evening.
And thank you, Greg. I mean, this has been a very, very challenging situation, and you've been in a very difficult spot, but you've worked diligently. The team has been tremendous, and thank you and the whole team for your work on this. We're gonna move on now to report of the chair of the board. What we got, Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give everybody sort of a heads up that it's highly likely that in January, we will have to start meeting in person again. And I've had some conversations with Administrator Dill and facilities, and I'm sure that we'll be getting a more detailed update going forward. I just wanted to let you know. And then also some of our community partners have been asking because they also need to get ready for in-person meetings. I know I've heard some legislators say that, you know, they can see what they can do, but it seems to me like the general tenor is that we will be in person again next year. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Turning on now to report of the chair of Ways and Means, which is me. I would say that I've continued to participate in conversations around what are we going to do to interrupt violence in our community. I want to thank Sheriff Clayton and Director Jackson and their teams for presenting on a really innovative program to us in board leadership that I expect that we will all see much more about soon, as well as a variety of other strategies that we're going to employ to really do something about violence in our community. I would also add that I've had the pleasure so far of being a part of the hiring process for the Assistant Corporation Counsel. Feel like it's been going well, and just I'm always glad to be able to be part of those processes when they take place. That's it for my report, and we're going to move on now to items for current and future discussion. None. Oh, Commissioner LaBarre, I see you. All right.
Sure. I forgive me if this was mentioned earlier. In terms of the CMH policy and the bonuses, Administrator Dill, can you just give a quick update in terms of what you expect on timeline on that?
Yeah, so we are going to convene the team tomorrow again to talk about what we've heard from both our labor partners and this board. And it's my hope to turn something around in the next 48 hours as an updated path forward. I want to work with Director Cortez and her team to make sure that the voices have been heard and that we put something together that will certainly meet the needs of our labor partners, but also meet the needs of CMH. So if you guys can give us the next 48 hours to work through the specifics, we'll be back before you with an update. It will likely come in the form of an email communication since we don't have a meeting scheduled. So I say look to your inbox for an update on all of this.
Okay. If needed, I hope then the 9 of us can be prepared, if needed, to pass that through in the same night, so we don't lose any time there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for considering that.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have any other items, current future discussion? Seeing none. Okay, we're gonna move on now to pending items. So back to our budget reaffirmation. I believe Commissioner Morgan has something for us.
Hi again. So there are a few things there tonight. The first item, let me see what the exact title of that is, was prepared by Andrew DeLu for us regarding the sustainability language that is in our, let me pull it up here so I make sure I have the right thing in front of me. Just updating our sustainability language that's in the budget. We put in language a few years ago saying outlining how we would like to have a sort of internal work group and all of that around the climate action policy. And we haven't really followed that language the last couple of years. I think we have a really good plan looking ahead now. And so Andrew put an amendment to that language in there that basically outlines the actual process that we're undergoing around a climate action plan. So basically just updating that language should be more correct. I don't know how else to describe that. Andrew, would you add anything else to that? Is there a better way to say that than I did?
I would not. That was certainly the intent, is just to align that policy language with all of the other actions that you've approved over the past year.
So that one I think would be ready to be voted on tonight if we wanted to move that one. The last couple that I have included as the supplemental, I do not intend to ask us to vote on that. I just wanted to propose those for discussion and then take a vote at the next meeting. But this one, I guess I would move this amendment forward, the recommended policy modification regarding the environmental stewardship and climate action work.
Support.
Can we vote on something from a pending item, or do we have to move it back into an agenda item?
You can amend the pending item. It's live.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, well, it's been motioned and seconded, so let's have some discussion about it. Commissioner LeBar, I think that's an old hand, but just in case you're ready to discuss already. Nope. Okay. Anybody want to discuss? Oh, yeah, you do want to discuss, Commissioner LeBar.
Well, I guess Jason, forgive me. The language on this was in what Andrew sent over, or was not?
It was. This is what Andrew sent over. So this is, if you pull up the board agenda, the Ways and Means agenda, it shows several separate documents on there with each amendment laid out separately.
Are we looking at 23 or 45?
Oh, yeah. So they are numbered. This one is, let me see which one this is. So this one is 23.
Thank you.
So if you pull up the Ways and Means agenda, under pending items, it has administration 2022 to 2025 budget reaffirmation, and then it has the cover memo resolution, and then four amendments here listed below.
Commissioner Scott. Oh, sorry, no, Commissioner LeBar, you're still have the floor. No, you're done. Okay, Commissioner Scott, go ahead.
23 is this is 23 when I open it is about the GF funds. This is not what you want to move.
Oh, you are correct. I'm sorry. I looked at the wrong number there. So this is 45. I should have started with the other one.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to be really clear. We are not looking at 23.
Not
No,
right.
yeah.
Very different.
Yes.
This is just number 45.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner or Chair Shink.
Thank you. I guess I know I seconded it, but I do wonder why tonight, because it's not, I mean, I will support this amendment. I just don't know that it's an emergency, and I worry that some people might not have read it is all, but I don't want to call people out and make them
Yeah, no, we don't have to move this tonight. This one was included originally when the agenda went out on Friday, so I thought everyone might have looked at this one, but I'm just trying to clean up language in the budget on this one. I don't really have any particular passion for it.
It's been moved and properly seconded, so unless something changes that.
Is anyone uncomfortable voting on this one tonight? If so, I could do whatever it is I would need to do, Michelle, to rescind that motion.
Commissioner Schenk would have to approve the rescinding of the amendment.
Should we do that? Is anybody uncomfortable? I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable because it's nothing urgent.
Can we just adjourn it to a time certain?
Well, I think I could just rescind the motion to move it, and then we can just discuss each of these and then actually vote on them at the next meeting, if that would work for folks.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I will rescind my motion, assuming that Commissioner Schenk agrees.
Support.
Great, thanks. Okay, Chair, so that was 45. Policy number 23 is related to the non-general fund allocations. So at the working session meeting, Tina raised a concern with us that admin felt like we could not have some of the allocation we made to employees be reimbursed by the federal government, whereas it would have. Because of the language that we changed in the budget that Commissioner Labar and Scott and I think others were advocating for. And so following that conversation, we asked admin to share some language with us to address that concern. Since
Somebody's
then,
not on mute.
yeah, I don't know where that's coming from. Sue, is that yours?
No,
Oh.
I'll mute myself, but it was.
I don't know. So anyway, so admin drafted this language. However, this isn't quite what I think we were looking for when we discussed this as a board. We were looking for language to maintain the policy that we had put in place to say that we will fund the negotiated salary increases for non-general fund departments, but we want that language to stay. We just want to fix the concern that was raised by finance so that we're not losing federal funds through this policy. So I guess I would not move this policy. Greg and I had a conversation earlier today, and he said the admin would go back and work on this language to see if they can achieve what we were hoping for. So I actually don't want to move this language at all. Greg, have I summarized that effectively?
Yes, you did. Thank you. And thank you for the conversation this evening.
Commissioner Scott.
Can we move to pull this amendment?
They haven't.
It's not moved yet.
Yeah,
I think we could just not move it.
okay. I just don't want it to show back up at full board so I just want it to just not be there.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
Just very, very interesting choice of words. But you just don't ever want to see it again. I got it. It's gone. Okay. Okay. All right. Are we done with talking about this one now? Anybody else have any other comments about it? I know Commissioner Scott is done with it. Okay. Commissioner Morgan, you have the supplementals. Were you hoping that we would have some discussion on those supplementals today, or?
I think so. Maybe I'll just throw them out there for consideration because I'm sure folks have been busy and maybe have not read through them yet. And so those are things that I can talk with folks offline about between now and the next meeting. I just wanted to make sure that they were thoroughly included so that you could consider them over the next couple of weeks. They also need a bit more work between myself and county admin to see if the language truly does make sense the way I put it in that requested amendment. But I'll just mention what these two are. So the first one that I proposed is a requested amendment to reestablish a planning position within county government to assist with implementation of a new comprehensive county plan, often referred to as a master plan, but I think that may be some dated language, but just so you have context as to what we're talking about. We've had conversation over the past couple of years about engaging in a new planning process that Greg has spoken with us about a few times, and it's been something that is kind of it's been put on the back burner first because of a CMH deficit, then because of a, hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic. And so the proposal I've laid out here would be to fund a position using funds that we would have otherwise contributed to fund balance. So I'm saying instead of putting more funding into fund balance, let's use some of that to create a planning position that we used to have as county government. We used to have an entire planning department. Some of this background is laid out in that full amendment language. I don't think it's feasible to bring back an entire department. However, I should note that we are one of the only counties, if not the only county in Southeast Michigan, that doesn't have a formal planning mechanism as part of county government. So in my conversations with SEMCOG, they have kindly shared with me that that is a weird thing, for lack of a better way to say that. So what my hope would be is that we could reestablish a planning position, so paired with an eventual plan that Greg has talked about to allocate one-time funds to have a consultant help us go through a new planning process over the next year or two. All of that is not fully developed yet, but I think it's important to get that planning position created so that we can start looking at hiring somebody for that. Otherwise, we're going to be kicking the can down the road to doing a new planning process further and further. The last time Washtenaw County did a comprehensive master plan was 2004, and that plan officially expired in 2020. So I'm bringing this forward because I'm very deeply concerned that we don't have a clear outline of where we want to go in the future as a county. And so when we're looking at things like, the budget, going through a budget process next year, allocating American Rescue Plan funds, none of that is tied to a clear long-term vision. And I think this is something we have to get a handle on after nearly 10 years, more than 10 years of not actually having any sort of planning department. So that's why I'm proposing this. We don't have to vote on it tonight. If people have questions now, great. If people want to look at it, think about it, and then talk to me between now and the next meeting, that is also great. And I'll defer to Greg in case he has any comments there.
No, the only other comment that I'll say is that, obviously, as you mentioned, this isn't fully vetted. And, when we create positions, we like to have structural resources to support it. So there's some work that we still need to do on this. Certainly not opposed to this as a path forward for our organization. It obviously makes a lot of sense. But just how we put the resources behind a position like this is certainly something that we'll have to figure out.
Great. So yeah, I'll work with you, Greg, and
Yes.
see if there's something that can be fleshed out in the next couple of weeks to look at that.
Other questions or comments? I thought that was a very nice summary, Commissioner Morgan. Thank you. So good. Some people might not even need to read it now. I still recommend that you read it, but it was a thorough summary. If there's no other comments, you want to give an overview of that second supplemental?
Yes, absolutely. So the last thing I'm putting forward, and I don't know why I was just on a roll getting things forward here. So this one as well, I want to work with county admin and OCD to lay out sort of the exact costing for this position. But what I'm proposing is that we add a formal position to support the Barrier Busters program. Over the last, well, I'll just read a little bit from the resolution here. I laid out my case here in the resolution for why I think this would be important. So OCD has supported the Barrier Busters program without any direct staffing, as far as I'm aware, for the last however long that program has existed. The Barrier Busters program is the program that supports a whole multitude of support services for residents. So it's a really flexible funding source that helps people with unmet needs broadly, whether that be transportation, emergency assistance funds, social workers, case managers. It has a lot of different functions that can help folks prevent evictions or utility shutoffs. And we've put more funds into that program throughout the pandemic here to where it's been serving a lot of folks in the community. Why I think this would be important to create a position for it. And I believe it wouldn't cost all that much money is because this program specifically supports residents throughout the county, but with a higher proportion coming from the eastern side of the county. Over 56% of the funds allocated in 2021 have supported families in Ypsilanti Township in the city of Ypsilanti. Nearly 57% of the countywide requests in 2021 have supported immigrant households. Nearly 70% of countywide requests have supported households with children. Over 50% of the countywide requests supported Latinx families or households. And then over 30% of the countywide requests this year have supported African-American households. So I think this is an incredible program that disproportionately serves low-income minority communities and families in a very flexible and effective way that a lot of other government programs are not able to. So I think if that program had the staffing, a staffing position to expand their scope, do more community outreach, directly work more closely with families and community leaders, nonprofits, I think we could expand the number of people and the range of folks taking advantage of this incredible program. And I think it would be a really positive thing for us as we seek to directly support disadvantaged communities throughout the county. So again, questions now would be great, or follow-up questions. I wanted to throw this out there for consideration as something that I think would have a positive impact on the county.
All right, well, we're gonna hit Commissioner Labar and then we'll hit Administrator Dill.
Thanks. Just first, in terms of technology, it looks like within the civic clerk system that the two documents are merging so that it picks back up on your planning department proposal down on page 2 of this supplemental. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I think I get the gist of it. You know, I generally want to be deferential to Greg's words of wisdom here in terms of position creation without identifying the funding source on a structural basis. With that said, you know, I think this is something where if we create this, we'll probably get more and more use out of it. And I don't necessarily know the right answer in terms of where this comes from structurally. The decrease in planned fund balance allocation is probably good enough as any place to start it. But I do think this is something that the 9 of us would be able to routinely refer to constituents and those in need. And also, it tends to be super flexible, or at least super flexible for county government in terms of the sorts of needs that it can meet. It's sort of a utility infielder when you're talking about economic human services. So I think this is worth doing. I'm fairly agnostic on where the funding comes from and would like to give Greg as much space and time as he needs on that. But I'd speak in support of the concept here.
All right, Greg.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, I have lots of thoughts on this. Many of them I don't think appropriate this evening. I'm supportive of it conceptually. I just want to talk through some of the connecting points to this. And I'll begin with a discussion in leadership on next week. And we will certainly add this to the agenda. But again, I have lots of thoughts about this item.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm gonna come back to you, Commissioner Morgan. Let's see if anybody has another thought for you. Anybody? Okay, Commissioner Morgan, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to Greg and Andy's comments there. So where this came from, by the way, is I think I've heard in several presentations from OCED over the last year about this Barrier Busters program and how incredibly effective it is. But I've also heard very subtle comments about how we don't have staffing for it. And so as I was thinking through the budget and thinking through how I would love to see us directly increase the funding for our non-general fund, our human service departments, OCD, public health. I think CMH is in pretty good shape these days. But I thought, you know, this is a direct way to increase human service supports and funding to directly connect with residents who are struggling with a whole different range of financial challenges. And I was thinking of this program and how if we could further develop and support that program, I think that could be incredibly impactful. In terms of the funding, Greg, maybe you can tell me the answer to this, or it can happen between meetings here, or between now and the next meeting in 2 weeks. But I believe the narrative of the budget says that we have a planned additional contribution to fund balance. And so my thinking with both of these these amendments was that we would just decrease the planned use of the planned contribution to fund balance. I think that's what I read in the narrative, but if I'm incorrect, then I could certainly be incorrect. Or if there's an alternate or better funding source structurally for these things, I would, of course, be open to that as well.
Yes, and that's what I'd like the flexibility and latitude to come back to the board on. I don't know that is the best, most appropriate use of those resources. And if indeed, like anything else in our organization, we deem this a priority, we'll find a way to fund it. And in some instances, that means that we take funding away from another area to support a higher priority. So I want to begin with a conversation with leadership next week and figure out a way to bring something back to you guys as quickly as we can.
All right, Commissioner Scott.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think in theory, I love the idea of both of these too, but I'm just trying to think about it all in conjunction with what we talked about earlier for a long time about the MAG study and compensating people, and what we talked about making sure we can get retention bonuses for people who are here to keep them in, and to try to think about paying people more to if we're going to talk about trying to, I'm just going to go back to those public health nurses. I mean, the amount that they're making is not something many people would think is reasonable, especially in the job they've had to do this year. So when we think about these things, I just want to think about all of those other things in conjunction with this too, recognizing that these both sound like fabulous ideas, but we have all of these other ideas too. So how do we continue to do all of these things? I don't want to be a naysayer, but boy, I sure would like to see public health nurses get paid more. And it's hard to think about paying a public health nurse $49,000 and create a position paying somebody $150,000. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Commissioner Morgan, I gotta go to you after I hit Commissioner Jefferson. He hasn't had a opportunity yet.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just chiming in on this. It's been, I guess, sort of a situation with barrier busters throughout the years, that the funding that they receive that is used to help our underserved community and constituents has a short lifetime throughout the year. It normally is spent before the first quarter is over most of the time. And so I don't know if we should find a way to assess the department need that over an OCED is one thing that we should also think about, is making sure that the efficiency of the management of the employees is capable of doing what it has been doing with barrier busters for the past few years. So I too have some thoughts on that also, but I'd be glad to hear what comes back from Administrator Dill after he speaks to leadership. Thank you.
Oh, Administrator Dill, you want to respond?
No, I echo Commissioner Jefferson's comments. I'll work with board leadership and then get something back to this full body.
All right, Commissioner Morgan, you're back.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to just one comment from Commissioner Scott. $150,000 is not what I'm proposing as a salary. That is the proposal for salary and benefits of what I think previously the planning position that we had at the county paid, or what the total cost was. I think it was like a $91,000 cost. I assume it would be lower at this point, but I just wanted to throw in kind of the highest number I thought it would be and then work back from there. I also believe the total cost for a position with Barrier Busters would actually be closer to 85,000 probably, but we'll work with county admin to flesh that out and look at what the total cost would be and what would be included in that to make sure that there's an exact number, but really just threw in numbers for discussion purposes here tonight. To Commissioner, I would also fully support increasing the pay of public health nurses and would be happy to support any amendments you want to propose on that. I think the salary study is the appropriate way to go to increasing some of those salaries, but to Commissioner Jefferson's point, I'm not aware of the program running out in the first quarter. As far as I'm aware, they have still been providing services throughout all of this year, but that's something I'll look into as well. It wouldn't make any sense to try and get more people to take advantage of it and then have it run out and not actually be there. So I'll look into that as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Scott, just to add on, I'm sorry, Chair. In years past, that fund has run out of money before the end of the fiscal year. And maybe not recently because we added additional resources. But year over year, in years past, it has run out of money.
This is the most lively debate or conversation we've had about a topic in, I think, the last several meetings. This is great. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Commissioner Scott, and then I'll follow back around and see if Commissioner Jefferson wanted to add anything else. Commissioner Scott.
I mean, I'm glad we're having the conversation just about what we can do. And if Barrier Busters is running out of money before the end of the year, then how do we think about, and it's running out of money because it's serving people. So what do we need to do to think about working with Barrier Busters to make sure people are getting the service they need? If they're running out of money before the end of the year, I would rather give them money to help to continue to serve people and make sure that people are getting that help that they need in the moment with Barrier Busters. My concern, just so you understand, is not about Barrier Busters. My concern is, and I love the idea of doing a new comprehensive plan. I think that's the term we use now. I think that sounds great, and you're right to have a direction, and it's not 150,000, it's 91,000. Nevertheless, I think my point is made. So 49,000 and 91,000 are people living very differently. And it's people being allowed to and able to live in the county and people who cannot afford to live here. So just think that our public health nurses, by and large, cannot afford to live in this county. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, I want to circle back around just in case you want to add anything.
Well, just wanted to agree with Administrator Deal. The funding does run out, and it was extended this year because of additional funds that came from other sources, that because of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners, comments, thoughts? Commissioner Scott, I assume that's an old hand. You're not trying to start the next round of comments yet. Careful. Okay. Okay, well then I will wrap up this part of the discussion. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan, for bringing these to us. It's lively discussion is great. I mean, that's one of the reasons why people like to watch our meetings so much. I think that both of these really speak to some of the priorities that we have set out as a board, such as being more strategic and using data to drive our decision making. And that's where the planning could come into play. I think we just have to figure out how does that fit best with our goals and the resources we have available, which we'll continue to talk about in board leadership. I think the presentations we've had from OCD, whether about Barrier Busters or some of the other programming, really makes us have to take a look at what's going on and how do we do better and figure out how do we provide the resources that we need to make sure that we're serving our residents, particularly our residents in the low to very low opportunity areas in the county. So I'm glad that we've been able to pay so much attention to that today. So we'll move on now. And with that, I'd look for a motion to, unless there's, are there any other thoughts or comments about the budget reaffirmation? So if anybody else is feeling like you got an idea, you want to throw it out there now. I see Commissioner Sanders is lighting up. You lighting up? You're not lighting up. You were just trying to motion to adjourn. I know what you're trying to do. Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and, are you going to make that motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a second?
Support.
Okay. All in favor? All right. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 8:45. And for our viewers at home, please don't leave. Our viewership always drops when we take this 5-minute break. Just hang in there with us. We'll be back. And the next meeting is also very interesting. So just hang in there.
Chair, one quick question.
Yes.
Were we supposed to move the budget through Ways and Means tonight?
I don't think we were. I think we had another. If we did, I just made an error.
No, I don't think we talked about moving it forward. It was going to stay in Ways and Means until you guys directed us to move it out.
Got it.
I was thinking
Okay,
it wasn't going to be this time.
All right,
I
great.
think
Thanks.
because we have another November meeting, and then I think the final meeting in December is where it will be at full board, is how I understood the timeline.
That's correct.
Okay.
Had me worried there for a second, Commissioner Morgan. I thought I was on top of it, but I was, so it's okay.
You got it.
All right. See you in 4 minutes. Those 5 minutes go quick. How you doing, Commissioner LaBarre?
I'm all right. Commissioner Hodge, how are you, sir?
Doing all right. think we might get out of here before 11 tonight.
Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Yeah,
All right. Who told you that, Andy? Where'd you get that saying from?
I think my dad. It's a great saying. I mean, it's wordy, but it conveys the message. You know, it does sort of make me kind of pretend like I'm, you know, some sort of sagely old country gentleman, but that's not the case.
What do you got for dinner there, Commissioner Sanders?
It's not dinner. It's leftover vegan chocolate cake.
Ooh.
From dinner yesterday.
Okay, vegan chocolate cake. Are you going vegan on us now?
No, that's just what the Thompson and Company served. It's delicious though.
Okay.
Can I just add? I think that, you know, the vegan chocolate cake is somehow, it just doesn't seem like. I just have so many issues
Some
with
strawberries and blackberries on top. You are cooking.
I'm just going to tell you that there's a woman on the Great British Baking Show this season. I don't want to spoiler alert anybody, so I'm not going to say where she is in the process if you're a baking show fan like I am. But she was committed to baking her personal bakes as vegan bakes, and Paul Hollywood liked them. And if Paul Hollywood can like them, I feel like there's hope.
I make the best eggless.
You know, if it makes you feel any better, Greg, I make a mean chocolate mocha crunch cake.
Oh,
I can
maybe
be
we
persuaded.
could all try some.
Back in person in January.
Right?
Commissioner Beamer, you said eggless? It was eggless?
I make an eggless cheesecake. It's not cheese free, it's egg free. And when I was dating my husband, I didn't realize it made a double batch. And I sent one to his family for the holiday and took one to mine. And my father-in-law ate all of it. And John was like, I started laughing and he goes, what? I go, there's tofu in that. And my father-in-law said, if this is tofu, I'll eat it all day.
I'm pretty sure it was
one of those
delicious.
things that the ingredients, sometimes you don't want to know what's in the ingredient.
Well, just don't bring it this way. I know it was delicious though.
Yeah.
Give me some real sugar in a chocolate cake.
Oh no, there's sugar. There's lots of sugar.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Commissioner Jefferson, you just nailed it. If I'm going to
Yes,
have
sir.
chocolate cake, I want the full effect.
Sugar is vegan, just you know.
Yeah, the old saying, Andy, is the creek don't rise. It was a reference to the Indian tribe, the Creek Indians. So it's an old one, but it has changed over time to mean a body of water. But that's how it's.
Wait, I thought it also had some reference to escaping plantations.
Exactly.
And the creek don't rise has a reference to that?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because you can cross the creek if it hasn't risen.
That's right.
So my grandma used to always say, like, I'll see you tomorrow with the help of God and a few policemen. It was her thing. Like, you know, I mean, we're Irish, so always with the help of God, but the help of God and a few policemen. And so then I used to say this to one of my patients' dad, like every day. I'd be like, oh, see you tomorrow with the help of God and a few policemen. And then he'd say, and the creek don't rise. And I was like, we just
All right,
keep
I'm gonna
adding
call
on
this
to
meeting
it.
to order.
No.
Sorry. But it is nice to chat, and I'm sure that when we go back to meeting in person, it'll be really nice. So we'll start with roll call. Mr. Mulcahy, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Beaman,
Present, attending remotely from the village of Manchester, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Hodge,
Present, attending remotely from Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Jefferson,
President, attending remotely from the township of Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County.
Commissioner Labar,
President, attending remotely from the city of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
President attending remotely from Dexter Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Morgan, I'll come back. Commissioner Sanders,
Present attending remotely from Pittsfield Township, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Commissioner Scott,
Present attending remotely from the city of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, and the great state of Michigan.
Commissioner Schenk,
Present attending remotely from Northfield Township.
Commissioner Morgan. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have citizen participation. I'm looking to see from Mr. Lindeman whether there are any residents wishing to participate. And it
Yes.
looks like,
Sorry, I'll text you the names.
okay. So please remember, you have 3 minutes. Please say your name and where you live, and 3 minutes, please. And waiting for the names. Trisha Duckworth.
Good evening. So tonight I'm here just for a quick quote. And I must say that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what it is, and what is it America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity. It's from Martin Luther King. We are not here to riot. We do stand and speak truth to power because of the long road of injustice that continues to happen over and over again. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Gail Summerhill.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I was taken back a little bit, well, a lot, when Jason Morgan referenced, I think he used the word harsh in tones on the previous meeting. I could be mistaken, but just referencing as far as tones. I'd like to bring attention to cultural differences. Yesterday, I was at the rally of the young 10-year-old that was had a gun pulled on him and was put in handcuffs. And his mother was there reporting to the news about the trauma that her son has experienced. I'm here today speaking for everyone who does not understand tones and how we speak in the midst of our pain. If you are a mother, if you are a father, and if your 10-year-old child, if your husband or anyone that you love is a target because of the color of their skin, when we reach so low that we're now attacking children, That's something that we need to be mindful of, and the trauma that people face and the fear that they face even walking, out of their homes. If you've been privileged enough not to ever experience that or feel that at any point in time in your life, I would consider that being blessed. What I would call you to do is take some time and do some research. Don't read it, look at it. Al Sharpton speaks of the justice. If you take the time and look at the video cam, even in this county, of the gun being pulled on the 10-year-old child before he put him in handcuffs. That child wasn't a threat. When you're thinking about policies and making decisions going forward, I don't know who you're speaking with that's advising you that people, my 3 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summerhill. Next is Lisa.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Lisa Carey Harrow. I'm calling from Pittsfield Township. I appreciate you giving the public an opportunity to speak. I'd like to say that this is a critical moment, and there's a critical need to focus on literacy, mentorship, and community programs for Eastern Washtenaw County. Please allocate the $6 million in American Rescue money as requested by Tricia Duckworth to the 30 grassroots organizations like Our Community Reads, Educate Youth, Mentor to Youth, and Survivors Speak Computer Literacy Program. These 30 grassroots organizations and nonprofits that she named are deserving. Let these groups utilize the ARPA funding because only they can currently identify satellite points of access to target the areas of greatest need. Those are the areas the American Rescue Plan was written for, and those are the ones that the American Rescue money was intended for. Please honor the architects of the Rescue Plan and recognize the incredible amount of work and the struggle it takes for grassroots groups just to get up and operating, and for the incredible amount of work those grassroots groups have invested in our community when everybody else has left them behind. You can be a big part of this small step towards making our county whole again. Thank you again for letting me speak. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I believe that that is the end of public comment, but there aren't other people who wish to speak. Would any commissioners like to follow up? Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming tonight. I just want to make clear that the Davis County, Utah is where the 10-year-old had the gun pulled on him and was arrested. Just want to make sure that you understood that's where that is. But also what's happening as we talk about funding some of our grassroots nonprofit entities within the Eastern County. It's all about developing relationships with a community of individuals, whether they're youth, adults, parents, or even those who are working in the area. Develop a relationship and a rapport of one that can lead to a trust because of the divide that is happening within the way resources from the county are distributed has not been effective. And that's why we're running now to change the way that we fund what used to be COFU. There's a disconnect with relationships and intimate understanding of the needs in our communities. And these groups that we're talking about, as far as some were mentioned from one of the participants, that these groups have intimate relationships already developed with those who need things and not willing to express their needs for fear and lack of trust of those who reach out to them from agencies that are local government, or even outside of local government. So we are trying to get together some community outreach and community engagement forums to speak with those in the community and those who are here on the participation who just spoke. I appreciate everything that you're saying to try and help get the message out once we get the dates set so that you can be available and make sure that if we can get families and youth to come and share the trauma and the experiences of their lives that have a different effect on their lives than one that is without an environment where there's been a disinvestment from the federal government and a less investment from local government. And I believe it's just because of miscommunication, and it's more understanding needs to be brought about through conversations in the community. So thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson. Do any other commissioners wish to speak? I don't see any hands raised. So with that, we will move on to liaison reports. Do any commissioners have liaison reports? I do. I can't say liaison report. Oh, Commissioner Hodge, do you have a liaison report?
I do, but I mean, if you want to do yours before mine, that's cool
No,
too.
it's okay. The top row of boxes, which are you and Peter Lindemann right now, I don't see the hand raised for some reason. Now
That's
you're
okay. Next
Anyway.
time I'll give a wave and a emoji hand. All right, so I got a couple. I'll share about community action boards. So at the last meeting, we had a update on our weatherization programming and how that's been going since we threw some more money that way from the first rescue plan package. It sounds like it's going really well. And then we also had an update on the foster grandparent program, which has changed a little bit, but it's still very successful. And it sounds like they operated very well during the pandemic too. There was another piece too. I think I mentioned this previously, that Community Action Board was considering amending the bylaws to add in term limits. They did vote for that at the last meeting to institute term limits, and I think it works out to be no more than 10 years or up to 10 years, but no more than 3 terms. But if you're in the middle of a term, you get to finish it out. The board wanted me to bring back to us, Board of Commissioners, the desire to have us look at uniformly instituting term limits or other kinds of reforms across all of the different county boards and commissions, not just having them do this on their own, and which leads into something I'll add about Board of Health later, because they're also considering term limits. So just bringing that up, that might be something we want to take a look at as we look at any kind of reforms to how we do the business of the different boards and committees. For Board of Health, we had what ended up being a very riveting conversation after a presentation about advocacy efforts related to menthol flavored tobacco products. It was very exciting. And after that, there's a little bit more conversation about term limits. I can say that the executive committee is going to be coming up with a few different bylaws proposals that will be brought back to the Board of Health to consider at the December meeting. So just so you know, I mean, since both of those, once they get passed by those boards, they come to us for approval. So the Community Action Board bylaws update should be coming to us soon. And then after the Board of Health does their thing, that'll come to us after that. That's what I got today.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, he did a great job covering the CAB, the Community Action Board. They did vote to do term limits, but it's a 3-year term, and you can come back after being 1 year absent. That's what they decided to do. So that's what they decided. But like you said, the conversation about doing this across the board with other committees and boards may be something we want to look at.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson. Any other liaison reports? Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Chair. As your Commissioner Liaison to the Board of Health, thank you, Justin, Commissioner Hodge. But as your Commissioner Liaison, actually, I just also want to note that the Washtenaw County Health Department started vaccinating children aged 5 to 11. And you can make appointments. They start next Tuesday. You can make appointments at the Washtenaw County Public Health site. And I would encourage all parents who have been anxiously awaiting for this to not forget about your county health department as a place where you can get your children vaccinated. I know a lot of people were calling repeat on their doctors today, but don't forget about us. We'll get you also. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. Any other liaison reports? Okay, so for mine, the Agricultural Lands Preservation Advisory Committee met last month and voted to recommend to Washtenaw County Parks that they continue the process to purchase a conservation easement on the Wren's property in Scioto Township. This is property that is at the corner, minus a little chunk, at the corner of Liberty and Wagner. And so really, in a lot of ways, a gateway to the more rural area of Scioto Township. And then WERS, the retirement fund, will have a special meeting in November to learn more about possibilities of reducing management fees in our retirement. So moving on, then we have a special order of business. Would somebody like to move the very simple
We pause
language?
there, Commissioner Schenk, just to let Robert
Michelle's breaking up, but it's to get Commissioner
Chair,
Morgan in the roll call.
Yeah, Chair, point of order.
right. I
Commissioner Morgan needs to
apologize.
state where he's calling in from. That's all I need.
Oh, thank you. Apologies. Calling from City of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, Michigan.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone like to move the special order of business? Or do,
no.
the computer is freezing on my end too, I think.
Can you hear me?
Okay, with that, we will open up the public hearing for, now, I think I just totally screwed this up. Corporation Council. Am I supposed to just open this up?
Point of
Yeah.
order, Corporation Council just got,
Okay.
I think she just, are you back, Michelle? I think she got.
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Yes. No need to move this. You just open it, allow comment, and then.
All right, thank you. With that, I will open a public hearing on the amended 2022-2024 budgets and the recommended 2025 budget. Are there any people wishing to make a comment on the budget? Seeing none, I will now close the budgets and the recommended 2025 budget and move on to appointments. We have 3 appointments tonight. CMH board appointment is Alfreda Rooks is my nomination. Youth Commission BOC liaison appointment is Justin Hodge. Commissioner Morgan had to resign from that, or did resign from that. And then the Substance Use Oversight Policy Board BOC liaison appointment. Would somebody like to move the appointments?
I'll move the appointments.
Who is the substance use person that you're appointing? I didn't hear that.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Chair,
Mr.
I'm moving the appointments.
Thank you.
Support.
Any discussion? Mr. Mulcahy, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Beaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Jefferson,
You're on mute, Commissioner Jefferson.
I can circle back.
Commissioner-
Commissioner Labar,
Yes.
Commissioner Machieski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes.
Appointments passed.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to move the consent agenda or actually the rest of the agenda? Commissioner LeBar?
I'll move the agenda starting with item 9, resolutions, Roman numerals kind of threw me for a loop there. 1, ways and means, the resolution on the admin positions for the sheriff's office. B, the resolution on the assistant prosecuting attorney position for expungement. 2, under Board of Commissioners, the resolution supporting passage of Freedom to Vote Act. 3, approval of claims, and that completes it.
Do we have support?
Support.
Does anybody wish to pull anything for separate separate consideration?
I just want to point out, we did not move the consent agenda, so we're gonna have to go back and move that after we go through the resolutions. But we're still.
Okay, is there any discussion on the resolutions? I think not. Mr. Mulcahy, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Yeah.
Commissioner LeBar,
Yes.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaman.
Yes.
Item passed.
Thank you. We'll move back to the consent agenda. I'm sorry, I got vaccinated yesterday and kind of on my last legs here. Would somebody be willing to move item 8, consent agenda?
I'll move it. I think this is the first time I've tried one of these longer form ones. So I'm gonna give it a shot here. So I'm gonna move the consent agenda, starting with 1, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Oh, I don't have to do all of it. I don't have to do all of
Say
it.
moved, so moved.
It's so moved. It's moved. Okay.
Support.
Thank you. Okay. Dang, I really wanted to do one of the longer ones.
Sorry.
Next time.
Any discussion? And Mr. Mulcahy, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jefferson,
Yes.
Commissioner LeBar,
Yes.
Commissioner Maciejewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Schenk,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge.
Yes.
Agenda passed.
Thank you. Item 10, report of the county administrator.
No report.
Thank you. Report of the chair of the Board of Commissioners. I would like to celebrate that we just passed a resolution to permanently fund the Conviction, Integrity, and Expungement Unit in the prosecutor's office. And tomorrow, there will be a press conference celebrating that at noon on the front steps of the administration building. Next, we have item 12, items for current or future discussion. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, let me go back and correct the statement about the boy, the 10-year-old boy in Davis County, Utah. The case that Ms. Summerhill was speaking of is dealing with the police department of Pittsfield in April 16th. So I just wanted to make sure that you got that correct. So there is a lawsuit in, and they were protested yesterday. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jefferson. Any other items for current or future discussion? Commissioner LeBar?
Just wanted to draw attention. I think everybody received an email related to a group of parents in the AAPS district that are looking for support for greater testing capacity at schools as part of COVID mitigation efforts. I had a chance to chat with them, and I will bring a resolution for us to support that sort of funding, but from the state. So I'll put that in the email, but just wanted to get that on everybody's radar screen for next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBar. Any other items for current or future discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn to our next session.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see a whole bunch of you tomorrow.
Night.
Good night.